Thank you so much, Alicia. This was really interesting to see. I know a lot of people just chiming in the chat about the populations that they're working with are working in preschool or young aged populations, as you know, objective fruit and vegetable intake can be really challenging in those populations. So thinking about
Yep.
what are some of the considerations. I did see a comment in the chat about what do you think caused this really stark change in the yellowing of the actual calibration stick itself? I know you said that you do a lot of
Mhm.
scans. Was it just the sheer number, or like what was your speculation as to the cause of the yellowing?
Yeah, I think it was the sheer number of scans that we were doing. Um, we've replaced them before, but it was like over a period of years. Um, I think cleaning a finger with an alcohol wipe sterilizes it and keeps us from passing things on to other people, but maybe isn't getting enough of the oils off long term to prevent things like that. Um, so I don't know enough about the physics behind anything related to the device to I don't think from my conversations with Werner and Igor that um that having that little bit of oil on a person's finger is going to matter at all for their scan or for the precision of that scan, but um long term it could influence the precision of the device and could influence the precision of like yeah, just how you're able to calibrate it, as I said. So if there's a little bit of residual oil that is on either the finger stick, sorry, that's on the finger cradle or on the lens itself, that's if they're not getting regularly cleaned in a way that removes that, then it's going to start to accumulate on the white stick as well. That's my hypothesis for where it came from. And again, since we've changed our protocol, we haven't seen the yellowing of the sticks. So that would be, in my mind, evidence that that hypothesis is probably on the right track. Might not be the only thing, but that that it's helpful.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I'll give the audience a time to type questions in the chat or feel free to unmute. I guess I can follow up with what sort of recommendations until we have additional finger cradles at different sizes or, for
Mhm.
people that are working in that population, what, in the interim can be done to make sure to minimize some of that error on precision. So I know you mentioned the 4 scans and maybe dropping the outlier amongst
Mhm.
4. Any other thoughts to minimizing some of those discrepancies?
I think using the fourth scan probably helps more in that I also again talking with Werner and Igor, um, the device, the Vegimeter seems to get more precise the higher the score is. So the higher the concentration of carotenoids, the more precise it gets. So I don't think that this precision issue is unexpected for them. Um, but where I'm coming from a public health background, it becomes problematic because so many people don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. So I'm not just working with populations who have high fruit and vegetable intake, right? So I think the 4 scans helps that issue. When you're working with kids, we've been testing some things like adding a little pad on top of the finger. That it's been pretty terrible. Don't do those things. It's not helpful. Um, so I think it's mostly just for right now recognizing that there are limitations and that if you're working with tiny fingers, it might not be as accurate or as precise. And if you're trying to make comparisons between kids who are younger and kids who are older, or across two different studies that are measuring different populations, that we might not be comparing apples and apples, because of potential for these systematic differences. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really good point, because I think one of our main goals of this collaborative and getting everyone in the room is to try to figure out really what we need to be collecting in addition to just the scores. So something like age, if researchers are not collecting age and controlling for age in the models, then they might be missing a huge piece of the analysis when we're thinking about how do we translate that to servings of fruits and vegetables. So I think you bring up a great point in making sure to collect age, especially if you're measuring across, something like all the way from elementary up to high school aged youth.
So age becomes a pretty good proxy for finger size. It's not perfect. If you have time, it's not super hard to buy some jeweler's ring sizers. They're not very hard to use, and you just slide it over the finger, take it to that last knuckle, and it gives you an idea, like some kind of more objective measure of how big the finger is too. So if that's something that you're wanting to incorporate, it's not that difficult to add. You could even, if you're using the Vegimeter forms within the computer as you collect the Vegimeter data, you could type it into the notes field and then just have it already there if you wanted to.
Yeah, and that definitely goes to collecting height and weight, which is something that we always recommend, right? Because we know that
Yep.
BMI is a confounder for Vegimeter scores. So something like
Yep.
having a ring finger size could be a great addition to, again, limiting the covariates that we know
Yeah.
impact.
Yep.
There was another question in the chat. So
Mhm.
Rachel is working with high schoolers, and many of them have long nails or nail art.
Yeah.
How might you think those affect scores, or have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah, my experience with long nails is it can be less comfortable for the participant because the assumption when the device was made was that nails would be short, I think. So the finger cradle is made in a way that if the nails are longer, they stick up over the top a little bit of that finger cradle. Um, so it can smash your nails a little bit more. I think that was a question that we did ask of Igor at one point, and he said, I mean, nothing that's on the top of the nail is going to matter. So the art, anything like that, it's not reading deep enough for any of that to affect anything.
This is like three-dimensional, like acrylic
Like jewels and
sculptures.
things like that.
Yes.
Then in that kind of case, it could influence that how strongly that spring is pushing down on their finger.
I have actually people measuring, collecting data right now. I'll see if they can take a picture
Okay.
of anyone who has it, just because I think up
That'd
to
be,
this group, it
yeah.
might be of interest, because it's not been a small number of the participants in the study.
Okay. I've seen like a few bedazzled fingers, but nothing like that's huge. My understanding, again, from how the engineering of the finger clamp would work is more pressure is not problematic. It's the less pressure that's problematic. So having a bigger finger, once it's blanched and the blood's out of the way, it's not gonna cause any more systematic error. It just might not be as comfortable for the participant. It's when the finger isn't as tall that could become a problem. So that would be my thought related to like whether that connects to error.
So it probably just squishes and is painful, but isn't influencing how the device is actually reading it. So that's good to hear.
I think unless the only way that that might not be true is if the nails are so long that the finger, like if the skin of the finger can't actually lay all the way across the lens, so it's not actually touching in some places, cause some additional error. I have not ever measured that though. Like you'd have to have somebody who has nails on and then is willing to take them off and test both ways. But if somebody wants to do that for a master's thesis, you can add that into your protocol.
Great.
Or like get temporary long nails,
Yeah.
like press-ons, right? So that people don't have to remove their precious nail art.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Another question came in the chat. It could be for you, Alisha, or kind of to the larger group. But the question is, if I recall that there were previous versions of devices, so whether that was Raman resonance spectroscopy or spectrophotometers that measured the palm or other areas, maybe they had less confounders to consider. But does anyone know kind of why we moved away from this? And Alisha, I'll let you start, but I can definitely chime in as well.
Yeah, sure. So the palm was used for resonance Raman spectroscopy. There are a couple of other products that I've been reading about recently that are alternatives to the Vegimeter that use a slightly different process. They're still using reflectance spectroscopy, but it's a different version of it that are going back to using the palm. When the Vegimeter was created and being tested, one of the thoughts behind using the finger was melanin and avoiding, like trying to find a place on the body that had the least amount. And also the consistency of blanching. So being able to have the finger clamp there and that springing action ideally is supposed to make it the same for everybody, assuming of course that fingers are about the same size. There's something else that is not coming to mind too. What else do you have to add, Marcella?
That was kind of, and I know, Rachel, you have some familiarity using Raman resonance, but I know that you used to have to go through multiple steps to control for melanin, like you were saying. So a lot of times you'd have to use a spectrophotometer to determine the melanin concentration of the individual, and then use that to control in your analysis by individuals' melanin concentration. So in terms of ease, I know that because the Vegimeter employs the melanin correction algorithm, it kind of reduces one of those steps and speeds up the process for data collection purposes. So that was going to be my response to that. But I know, Rachel, you were in a lab that used RRS.